Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I want to commend you for being so engaged. You don't see that often, but it's great to have. And I'm Bob Jonsen. I'm the present chief of this for Palo Alto Police Department. Been doing this for 36 years from various organizations from Los Angeles to Menlo Park, and like I said, now in Palo Alto. But I'm really involved in this race because I think it's time for the community to have a sheriff who is engaged in transparency, accountability, and police reform. So I think this is an important election to pay attention to. So again, Arthur, thank you for being so engaged in this.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. So, adding on, why should high schoolers care about local politics and who's the sheriff of their county?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, but the sheriff of the county is pretty important because ultimately it is the chief law enforcement officer for the county, especially in the incidents of an emergency. And that's where we really need to pay attention because in our environment today, as you know, in Santa Clara County, we have a lot of municipalities, and then there's the sheriff's organization. And the sheriff's organization is more complex. And why I say that is it's more than just providing law enforcement services for the local jurisdictions. It obviously has responsibility for the correctional institutions, the courts, the transit system, and many other areas. And it has the resources that can assist the local municipalities, again, in the state of an emergency. So a lot of value to the sheriff's organization. And I think that's why everyone should be interested in this particular race.
Thank you so much. Um, my next question, what are some of the current issues you see prevalent in Santa Clara County law enforcement?
Yeah, I think right now, I mean, we're all concerned about crime. There's a tremendous uptick in crime, or at least the perception of crime. And I've heard that from numerous residents throughout the county. And I think that's something that we need to address. And I think the best way to do that is through a very strategic approach and collaboration with all the agencies within the county. Homelessness is another major issue. Mental health is a big issue. That's one that we've been very progressive and proactive in here in
Mhm.
Palo Alto that I plan to take to the county level. And the mental health for those housed in the justice system is also a big concern for many, or the lack of resources in the correctional institutions for those individuals experience mental health issues. And that's something I'm very passionate about as well. So those are probably the big issues. Transparency, accountability are other high priorities for voters. And again, I think my experience is well positioned for this particular race.
Absolutely. Diving deeper into mental health as an issue, how do you plan to incorporate mental health as a priority with the incarcerated, and how have you done it in Palo Alto? And what are your plans in the future?
Right. For those that may not know, countywide, Palo Alto was the first municipality, and right now the only municipality that has a psychiatric emergency response team. And what that is pairing a mental health clinician with the officer, so they're available to respond to calls involving a mental health crisis. That's a program that I think needs to be expanded dramatically throughout our county, which will also assist local municipalities in providing them a resource for when they need it. In the jails, I think that's something we need to address today. There's a lot of conversation about building new facilities, but that'll take years and millions of dollars. And I think where we need to do is invest our time in creating partnerships with our educational institutions for students like yourself who may be interested in taking on a profession as a clinician, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, and creating intern programs within the correctional facilities. So those individuals would be able to gain experience, that are going after those degrees, while also providing greater access for the individuals housed in the correctional institutions. So we can dramatically expand the access to care by having intern programs. And that's one of the things that I've made a high priority on my list.
I think those intern program sounds really interesting, as well as the psychiatric program in Palo Alto. Um, another question: how are some ways you think would help reduce the recidivism rate of incarcerated coming back to jail?
I think the fantastic question, and one that's just kind of been ignored for many years at the county level. And why I say that, again, what a lot of people may not understand is that when we passed AB 109, which was designed to help release individuals out of the state penitentiaries,
Mhm.
We didn't really allocate funding necessary at the county level that would take on those housing responsibilities. Because now what happens is when somebody is sentenced, if it's not for a violent crime or a sexual crime, they're most likely going to spend all their time at the county level. And that's where we have an opportunity to bring in those rehabilitation programs at the county level. And why I say that's so important, and with a little emphasis, is a lot of those rehabilitation programs are only at the state facilities. So we have to reallocate funding so we can get these apprentice programs, educational programs available for inmates from day one of incarceration, so they can start that path to reentry into our society.
Awesome. Thank you. Shifting away a little bit away, I'm wondering, what are your opinions on body worn cameras and how do you see yourself implementing BWCs under your administration?
Right. I think they're amazing. And the reason I say that, while I was the chief of Menlo Park, we implemented them early on. That was a high priority when I became the chief, of having body worn cameras available and accessible for every officer working patrol. And we did that. We accomplished that. And in Palo Alto, we did the same thing. As soon as I arrived here, even though Palo Alto Police Department was very progressive and it already had in-car cameras, which is important, we gave body cameras to all the officers as well. So now we have the most accountability than any other agency in the region. And why I say that is we have 5 different cameras, or actually 6 different cameras, capturing every interaction our officer has, meaning 5 different views on the in-car system plus the body camera view. So we capture a lot of video. And I think that's a great accountability measure that every agency should have to reduce liability.
Absolutely. I think accountability is so important with body worn cameras. And I think another prong is also how body worn cameras help create a transparency between law
Right.
enforcement and the
Right.
public. So my question is, how will you create more transparency within law enforcement and the public? I know body worn cameras are a huge step. Is there anything more you would do?
Yeah, one of the things I've always advocated for is greater transparency, and the state laws have moved the profession in that direction a little bit. Why I say that, passage of SB 1421, as you know, really requires us now on major incidents to release body worn camera video and other investigative material that we may have to a major incident, such as an officer involved shooting. I actually would like to see that transparency law expand to where we would have a little more freedom in sharing the information that we capture on body worn cameras, because that's important from a messaging and a trust perspective. Because what you're seeing now as a resident is really only our worst incidents, right? We're
Right.
not showing you the day-to-day activities where officers are engaging our community in a very positive, proactive way. And I think releasing that type of footage would benefit us in multiple ways. So I'm an advocate for that.
Absolutely. I think that's a really interesting insight because I do agree. Yeah, you don't really see like all the good interactions between
Right.
officers and with body worn cameras. So thank you. Another question is, um, Cupertino uses Santa Clara Police
Okay.
Department. So my question is, as a Cupertino resident, why should Cupertino residents continue putting their trust in the Santa Clara County Police Department, rather than creating your own department?
Well, just so we're clear, Santa Clara Police Department is its own police department.
Right.
Santa Clara Sheriff's Office oversees Cupertino.
Yeah.
So you have a contract with the Santa Clara Sheriff's Office. So I just think that's an important distinction for people to understand. Why I'm actually an advocate for those type of contract law enforcement is that the Sheriff's Office, to my earlier comment, has a lot of resources available. So for Cupertino to start their own police department from scratch is millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
We can provide through the contract services, the services that you need tailored to your community. That contract can always be expanded if necessary. But again, you have a lot of resources at your disposal that you're not necessarily paying for as you would by having your own municipality police organization. So unless the service is really not meeting the Cupertino residents' needs, I think it's a good service to have, a good opportunity to have of contracting with the sheriff's office. I actually am an advocate. I think more cities could do that from a cost saving measure.
Thank you. Yeah, for my opinion, I think you guys are doing a great job. So thank you so much. One of my last questions is, How will you make sure new officers are thoroughly trained before entering the field?
Right. I think training is critically important. It's something that we do fairly well in the state of California, but I'm a huge advocate for more training and more strategic training and really expanding the type of training. We do a lot of training in tactical skills, which is great, vitally important, but I think we need to do more in human skills, how we interact with people, how we communicate with people, how we de-escalate situations, and how we
Mhm.
take care of ourselves so we can be well. I'm a huge advocate. You may have found through research, I'm certified in compassion cultivation training as well as mindfulness, and I think those two types of training are vitally important. And I'm glad to see that the profession is starting to take them serious so we can take care of our people.
Absolutely. I think that's so crucial to like the progress that's being made for coming forward. And also just to address this, a lot of times in the news you see like overuse of force for police officers in some interactions. So
Okay.
I'm wondering how you might change like the environment where sometimes people are uncomfortable talking to police.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that question of public trust, right? And one
Right.
of the things that I set from day one, and I've done it in everywhere I've worked, is you have to set expectations for your personnel. And my rule number one is respect everyone they have an interaction with respect. And I think that's really, really important. Now, sometimes that respect may not be reciprocated, and force may be used in certain situations where people aren't complying with things. But the reality is, we can always treat an individual with respect. And anytime that respect is not given, I hold people accountable. And I think that messaging is really important for the community to understand, because if they feel they were disrespected by an officer, they need to have confidence that they can go to that organization, report it, and that it will actually be looked into. That goes back to the conversation on accountability. So I think having those messaging, the accountability mechanisms in place are really, really important to build that trust.
Thank you so much. My last question I want to end on is just what are the most important things you want voters to know about you while considering you for the election?
Yeah, I think again, great question. But I think when you really look at all the candidates, and I actually commend all of them for wanting to make their organization better. But one of the things that's become somewhat obvious is that I've been doing these things. And I think that's important. I've implemented psychiatric emergency response teams. I've put in accountability measures. So it's not a matter of what I will do, it's what I've done and I'll continue to do. And I think that's an important piece to understand.
Thank you so much.